In the heart of America's farmland, something subtle is unfolding. Across Iowa's sprawling cornfields and prairie remnants, honeybees are changing their routines, altering their foraging patterns, and responding to their environment in ways that weren't as pronounced just a generation ago. These shifts aren't dramatic or sudden, but they're measurable, and they tell a story about adaptation, environment, and survival. Iowa sits at the center of one of the most intensively farmed landscapes on the planet. Over 90% of the state is dedicated to agriculture, with corn and soybeans dominating millions of acres. For honeybees, this presents a particular challenge. Unlike the diverse wildflower meadows and mixed forests that once characterized the region, modern Iowa offers a feast or famine cycle of floral resources. When crops bloom, there's abundance. When they don't, there's scarcity. This dramatic seasonal variation has quietly shaped how bees behave, where they forage, and how colonies organize their labor. Researchers have observed that honeybee colonies in heavily agricultural regions like Iowa are adjusting their foraging strategies in response to this altered landscape. Bees are central place foragers, meaning they return to the same hive after each trip. They communicate the location of food sources through the waggle dance, a figure-8 movement that encodes distance and direction. In diverse habitats, these dances typically point to a variety of locations scattered across the landscape. But in Iowa, scientists have noticed that bees often concentrate their efforts on fewer, more distant patches of flowers, traveling farther on average than bees in less agricultural areas. This isn't a sign of confusion or distress. It's adaptation. Honeybees are remarkably flexible. When nearby resources are sparse, colonies shift their foraging effort outward. Studies using radar tracking and genetic analysis of pollen loads have shown that bees in monoculture-dominated regions can travel 3 to 5 kilometers or more to find adequate forage, compared to 1 or 2 kilometers in more botanically rich areas. This extended travel comes at a cost. Longer flights require more energy, which means more honey consumed by the colony just to sustain daily operations. It also increases wear on workers, shortening their already brief lifespans. But distance isn't the only shift. Timing matters too. Iowa's agricultural calendar creates narrow windows of floral availability. In late spring, when oilseed crops and some early wildflowers bloom, bees experience a surge of activity. Then, as summer deepens and row crops dominate, the landscape often becomes a floral desert. Researchers have documented that colonies respond by adjusting brood production, the process of raising new bees, to match resource availability. When food is abundant, queens lay more eggs and the workforce expands. When resources dwindle, brood rearing slows. This synchronization helps colonies avoid starvation during lean periods, but it also means that hive populations fluctuate more dramatically than they might in stable environments. Temperature patterns are also influencing bee behavior in Iowa. Like much of the Midwest, the state has experienced shifts in seasonal temperature norms over recent decades. Warmer springs can trigger earlier flowering in some plants, while late frosts can damage blossoms that bees depend on. Evidence indicates that honeybees are emerging from winter clusters earlier in years with warmer springs, but if forage isn't yet available, this early activity can deplete stored honey reserves before new nectar flows begin. Colonies that miscalculate this timing face nutritional stress, which weakens their resilience against disease and parasites. One of the most significant behavioral changes involves how colonies allocate their workforce. In environments with unpredictable or patchy resources, flexibility becomes essential. Research suggests that bees in agricultural landscapes like Iowa's are adjusting the age at which workers transition from in-hive tasks to foraging. Normally, young bees perform duties like nursing larvae and building comb, while older bees forage. But when foraging becomes more demanding, colonies can accelerate this transition, sending younger bees out earlier. This helps meet immediate needs but reduces the overall lifespan of those workers, creating a trade-off between short-term survival and long-term colony health. Pesticide exposure also plays a role, though its effects are complex and still being studied. Iowa's agricultural intensity means that bees frequently encounter a variety of chemical inputs. Sublethal exposure to certain pesticides doesn't necessarily kill bees outright, but it can impair navigation, reduce foraging efficiency, and weaken immune function. Scientists have observed that bees exposed to low levels of neonicotinoids, a class of insecticides, sometimes exhibit altered foraging behavior, including reduced ability to communicate food locations accurately or decreased motivation to leave the hive. These subtle effects accumulate over time, influencing colony performance in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Despite these challenges, Iowa's honeybees aren't disappearing. Beekeepers across the state manage hundreds of thousands of colonies, and many report stable or even growing numbers, though this often requires more intensive management than in the past. Supplemental feeding, chemical treatments for parasites, and regular monitoring have become standard practice. What's changing isn't necessarily the presence of bees, but the effort required to sustain them and the ways colonies themselves are responding to environmental pressures. This matters beyond honey production. Honeybees are among the most important pollinators of crops, contributing billions of dollars annually to agricultural productivity. In Iowa, they pollinate soybeans, apples, cucumbers, pumpkins, and dozens of other crops. When bee behavior shifts in response to environmental stress, it can affect pollination efficiency, crop yields, and the stability of agricultural systems. Understanding these behavioral changes helps farmers, beekeepers, and conservationists develop strategies to support pollinators in working landscapes. Scientists continue to study how honeybees adapt to agricultural environments using tools ranging from genetic analysis to automated hive monitoring systems. Some research focuses on breeding bees better suited to the challenges of monoculture landscapes. Other work examines how small changes in land use, like planting wildflower strips or preserving prairie remnants, can provide critical forage during resource gaps. Evidence suggests that even modest increases in floral diversity can reduce foraging distances and improve colony nutrition. What's unfolding in Iowa reflects a broader story about how species respond when their environment changes rapidly. Honeybees aren't passive victims of agricultural transformation. They're active participants, adjusting their behavior, their biology, and their social organization to survive in a landscape vastly different from the one their ancestors evolved in. These adjustments reveal both the resilience of these insects and the limits of that resilience. Understanding why bees behave differently in places like Iowa helps us recognize the hidden costs of agricultural simplification and the importance of maintaining even small refuges of diversity within working landscapes. It reminds us that adaptation, while remarkable, isn't without consequences. The bees are still here, still pollinating, still thriving in many ways, but they're working harder, traveling farther, and navigating a world that offers less forgiveness for mistakes. Recognizing that difference is the first step toward building a landscape that supports both productivity and the pollinators it depends on.